Hello and welcome to Epicenter Bitcoin, the show which talks about the technologies, projects, and startups driving decentralization and the global cryptocurrency revolution. My name is Sebastian Couture.
And I'm Brian Fabian Crane. Today's June 29th of 2014, and thanks very much for joining us for episode 26. Today's a bit of a special episode because we don't have a guest as usual. Instead, we'll be showing or playing a conversation I had in Toronto with the guys from Bitcoin Decentral. I've been kind of on a North America trip. I'm about to head back to Berlin, but I was also stopping by Toronto and talked extensively with the guys there.
Yeah, but before we get into that, there's a couple of things we want to talk about. So we did our interview with Mike Hearn last week,
which was very exciting.
Yeah, which was super exciting, and the response that we got from that just kind of both took us by surprise. I was also traveling last week. Just got back today. Actually, it was in the south of France with some friends. And Brian, you sent me a message, saying that things were kind of blowing up on Reddit, and we also got covered on CoinDesk. So it's by far our most popular episode. And think that the discussion on Reddit is kind of a testimony to to what Mike was saying, is that there's some problems right now in the Bitcoin core development, and it is kind of worrying. So I think people are taking it seriously. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess Mike said some things that were controversial and are controversial, and they're very quotable. So the Reddit post was, I think Mike said, we are in a state of crisis. This is a crisis period for Bitcoin development, and it's the development on the Bitcoin core essentially has completely stopped. And of course, because Mike is such a well-known and recognized person, people posted on Reddit, and there was a huge discussion about that. I mean, people disagreed with him. Some people supported him. It was very controversial. So there's definitely people who don't view it the way he does, but it's an important topic, and it's created a lot of conversation. I know in Reddit there was more than 200 comments kind of discussing these statements by Mike Hearn, and a lot of people weighed in, from like Mike Hearn himself to Peter Todd and other guys.
I had never really heard of this problem with the core development, right? So what's interesting about this is how it kind of just took me by surprise, and maybe took others by surprise as well. I mean, we see everything, the infrastructure is being built on top of Bitcoin, but in the meanwhile, what Mike's point of view seems to be is that there's underlying problems in the core development. So will that eventually catch up to all of the innovation that's happening on top, and will Bitcoin continue to be a good platform to develop on if there's no development being done at the core? I guess it's kind of the question that we're asking ourselves.
What I thought was also interesting is one thing Peter Todd said on Reddit. And so his point was that the problem is not that people aren't working enough on Bitcoin, or there's not enough resources on Bitcoin, but it's that we simply don't know a lot of how to do things, because the science isn't there. So, for example, one thing we talked about with Mike Hearn as well was transaction fees. And I kind of think we both agreed, and a lot of people agree, that there's something needs to change there. But how exactly that can be done is kind of unclear. So a lot of or another thing is the centralization of mining, is obviously a problem, but it's very unclear what the solution is. So I think his point was that, what's actually missing is that the sort of science and actually the knowledge of how to proceed. I saw in another conversation on Reddit that Gavin Andreessen actually blamed Peter Todd for the lack of development, because he keeps, I think he also criticizes the developers a lot. So it's not entirely clear what the problem is, but it's quite clear that if you look at the whole Bitcoin ecosystem, all that money flowing into companies, there's actually very little happening, or very little of that money is going into Bitcoin development itself.
Well, I guess that just goes to show that the internal conflicts which he talks about are actually there, because if these guys are kind of going off on Reddit.
I mean, even if you looked at antagonism against Mike Hearn on Reddit, it was very strong too. There's people, some people were being very negative about him. So that's definitely there. There's no question. I wasn't aware of what Mike Hearn said, which was that this was the reason why some of the Bitcoin developers, and in his view, like everyone except Gavin and Andreessen, aren't actually working on important things, because even small things but important things create a huge controversy. So yeah, it's interesting, worrying certainly, and well, hopefully this will. Perhaps his own project, Lighthouse, will be a solution to this. I don't know.
Yeah, so if you haven't listened to it, check it out. It's on our SoundCloud page. You'll see it there, episode 25 with Mike Hearn.
Before we kind of move on, I want to briefly talk about a documentary, which is called Bitcoin, The End of Money as We Know It. And they are running a Kickstarter campaign. And I've talked with the guy who's doing the documentary. His name is Thorsten Hoffmann, and he's a German but living in Australia, and they're now running this Kickstarter campaign. It runs until July 12th. Now, the documentary is meant for sort of a general audience to introduce them to Bitcoin. He does a lot of interviews with kind of well-known Bitcoin people like, Andreas Antonopoulos, Roger Ver, Nicholas Carey, and others. And, after I talked to him, I think it looks like a great project. What's also cool is that some of the interviews he did, at least 2 of them, are available in sort of the raw footage on YouTube. And the one I really liked was with Matt Miller. I'm sure many of you know Matt Miller. He's that bald guy from Bloomberg who, he lived on Bitcoin for a week purely, and he's been covering Bitcoin for Bloomberg, and he's been doing a really great job. And so he talks to him, like, how did that happen? How did he get into Bitcoin? And like, how has been his interaction with Bitcoin community? It's a really great interview. So yeah, I think, check that out. It looks like a great project. If you want to support it, there's a few different options. You can basically get the basic reward, or the $20 reward is just to get the movie. You get the streaming link and bonus material and things like that. But what's kind of funny though is if you get a higher reward, there's, for example, with the $85 reward, you can become a trillionaire. So what that means is they give you banknotes. And they have like one from ex-Yugoslavia with Nicholas Tesla on it, and then a Zimbabwean $10 trillion banknote you can get. So I guess it sort of is a reference to the deflationary aspect of Bitcoin. They have these banknotes of super inflationary currencies that you get as a reward if you kind of give a bigger support for the project.
That's really funny.
It is pretty funny. I mean, the Tesla thing is cool, no? Because Nicholas Tesla himself was such a, iconic figure. And, of course, to have a $10 trillion banknote, it's kind of insane. If you want to check that out, just Google Bitcoin End of Money and Kickstarter. Or alternatively, the link will be in our show notes. So you can find it like that. It's going on till July 12th. And then the funding's mostly there. I think also the movie has been mostly shot. So this is not one of those Kickstarters, at least I think it's not, where, you sort of have to worry whether it actually gets finished. So I think this will happen, and it's going to come out pretty soon, I think at the end of the year.
So I just want to take a minute to talk about Coin Summit. As you guys know, we will be at Coin Summit. It's coming up real quick, July 10th and 11th. We'll be doing some interviews there and listening to some talks and also producing content around that conference. So if you want to go to Coin Summit, you can request an invite at coinsum.it.
Yeah, and also let us know if you're there. We can meet up. So you can meet your favorite podcast hosts. Just very briefly before we get started with the main content, Bitcoin Decentral is one of quite a few Bitcoin centers in the world. I've seen a few now. I've seen the New York one and some others. And I think Bitcoin Decentral, or they're actually changing the name to Decentral in Toronto, is by the most impressive, ambitious project that there is in this space. It's a big house, 4-floor house, I think like 500 square meters or something, in a a prime area in Toronto. They have Meetup there, co-working space, accelerator. And so I was visiting Toronto kind of on my way to a wedding in Chicago because I wanted to see Bitcoin Decentral. And I met up with the guys there and then interview with the guys, or some of the guys there. And the guys that are in this conversation are Anthony Iorio. He's the founder of Bitcoin Decentral. He's also founder of Ethereum. He's an executive director of Bitcoin Alliance of Canada. And he's also founder of the Toronto Bitcoin Meetup. The other guy is Arthur Corry. He's the managing director of Decentral Accelerate, which is their incubator or accelerator. Then there's Ethan Wilding. He was a former philosophy professor, and now he's sort of the resident philosopher there, works on all kinds of things, and also involved in Ethereum. And then there's Michael Perklin, who's a Bitcoinsultants, a director of Bitcoin Alliance in Canada, and the founder of a cryptocurrency certification consortium. Like all those guys will, talk in the interview and will introduce themselves as well, talk more about the project. The main focus was sort of the accelerator and the project, their goal to incubate and accelerate a lot of startups in Toronto, especially startups that focus on decentralized application and those kind of Bitcoin 2.0 protocols. So enjoy that. Hi, so I'm here in Toronto visiting Bitcoin Decentral. I'm very excited to be here. I've heard a lot about Bitcoin Decentral, and since I'm working on setting up something similar in Berlin, I was, extremely excited to visit these guys. And I'm sitting here with Anthony Iorio, who started the center, and with his whole team. So perhaps to start this podcast, we can go around and have all you guys introduce yourselves. So do you want to start off, Anthony?
Sure. I'm Anthony Iorio, and we opened this building on January 1st, and I do the Toronto Bitcoin Meetup groups. Well, there's a bunch of us that work on it now. We do it every week. I work with the Bitcoin Alliance of Canada. I work with Ethereum, CryptoKit, Decentral. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Arthur Corry. I'm the managing director here at Decentral, and I came to one of Anthony's meetups. And then I couldn't help but devote my life to this amazing emerging space. So in the building, we're setting up an accelerator supported by a venture fund, and that's fueled by a co-working ecosystem and all events and all kind of community things we're working on.
My name is Michael Perklin. I'm also here with the Decentral crew. I wear a lot of hats in the Bitcoin space. I work alongside Anthony with the Bitcoin Alliance of Canada. I also work alongside him with C4, the Cryptocurrency Certification Consortium. And I have my own company that's based out of this building, Decentral, Bitcoinsultants. We are a Bitcoin security consulting firm. All of these hats are fun to take on and off. Working here at this space with all these bright individuals.
My name is Ethan Wilding. I used to teach philosophy at Wilfrid Laurier University and University of Waterloo, and I became obsessed with Bitcoin and realized I want to just immerse myself in the space, and now I work here at Bitcoin Decentral.
So perhaps we can get started off by talking about the project you guys are all involved in, which is Bitcoin Decentral. So how did you guys get started?
From doing the meetups for a couple of years in Toronto, having a space of our own was always something that I had my eye on, because doing meetups at bars or doing them at louder places, there's always it's not the ideal setting to have presentations. To get a dedicated space in Toronto is very difficult. But I had my eye on a location where we could do the meetups, where we could do a co-working space and eventually an accelerator program. Just a place where people in the space can get together and ideas can flow. And I realized from just hanging out at coffee shops previously with 4 or 5 people in the Bitcoin space, it was really exciting. And I figured a whole building where we can get people just immersed in this amazing technology that's Bitcoin and decentralized applications and blockchain technology, and have a building where all this can come together is something that I'd wanted to do for a while, and it finally came, and I was able to do it earlier this year.
And when did you get started with the meetup? So you said a couple of years.
Yeah, 2012. near the end of 2000. Actually, no, just in the fall 2012.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and we do every week now, every Wednesday, Bitcoin Wednesdays in Toronto. I think consistency is really important, so people know without even having to visit the meetup groups or anything. They know that every Wednesday they can come down here at 7:00 and be with other people that are involved in the space. And we're doing a lot more. Or the plan is to do a lot more presentations. We're doing Skype call-ins now from people in the space. We had Tatiana Moreau on yesterday talking about Tatiana Coin. And we usually get really good turnout every week. So I encourage people to do meetups, just try to be really consistent with them and try to do them as frequently as possible, even if you're getting 5-10 people out to them. So that's where the space came about, was from the meetups and then wanting to have a whole building dedicated to Bitcoin and decentralization and blockchain technology.
Did you have the accelerator in mind at the very beginning when you started the space?
Yeah. We wanted to have, it wasn't just to be a co-working space. The plan was to have an accelerator program. I didn't know much about them. I mean, I knew about incubator spaces, but accelerators, which are fast-paced, shorter-term periods, sets of deliverables that people then graduate from after, say, a 3-month period. So this is where Arthur came to one of the meetups, and he had run the first. Actually, I'll let you talk a little bit more about what you've done in the space.
Sure. I came from the West Coast. I came from Vancouver, British Columbia, and that is a short plane trip from San Francisco. So Vancouver had a really interesting ecosystem that was a little bit ahead of Toronto, even though it was smaller. And so I had a taste of that. And then when I came to Toronto, I realized that just wasn't happening here yet.
You're talking about the accelerator ecosystem.
Yeah, startup ecosystems and how startups connect with investors to find financing to grow their companies. And that's really what an accelerator does. So I started the first here in town. And because of its success and the model that I created around that, which was actually supported by government money, after about 2 years, I found that it was a successful business on its own, but it wasn't really scalable as was. And I wanted to go on and do something bigger. And luckily, I saw Anthony's vision and was able to plug in to that at the right time, because the decentralized sector, the decentralized app sector, is now seeing more investment than any other particular tech sector. And the interest around it is global and phenomenal. So we're getting in touch and being contacted by some of the thought leaders around the world. Our network is just fascinating, and we're talking to amazing people every day, and we're seeing real invention happen.
You said it's more investment in the decentralized application than any.
Not actually investment happening as of yet, but I would say interest.
The
buzz around it is definitely
and
around
the
Bitcoin and is more than anything else than you're seeing. Some of the newest funds popping up in the Valley are related to Bitcoin.
It's interesting too that you guys are focusing on the decentralized application side of it, because I've also talked with, for example, the plug and play people, and that's not their focus, right? Their focus is, also more like the wallets, this kind of infrastructure side.
The vision that we had was to not make it anything to do actually with Bitcoin, to focus on decentralized applications. But I think we're also going to look at, things in the Bitcoin space that do stand out. But for us, it's about decentralization. In fact, we're changing the name, and we've already changed the name to Decentral. It's not going to be Bitcoin Decentral anymore. The space will be Decentral. That's a brand that we're going to go with. But it'll still have close ties to Bitcoin as well.
Yeah.
But I think just being and focusing on decentralized applications, it's a little more appealing to investors, I think, to give them the vision of not just the Bitcoin space, but saying, hey, there's this technology, this blockchain technology, this consensus, open, transparent system, and you can say, it's like what Bitcoin has done, but it's going to be so much more than that. So as soon as you start talking a lot about Bitcoin, some people they can dismiss it, but I think it's the technology, the underlying technology, which is what we can get people's attention with, and that's what we think is exciting. That's where we think it'll be so much more than the Bitcoin space.
And can you talk a bit about the progress with the fund? Like, when are you getting started? Or I know the first batch is not here yet, but you told me you've already found the companies.
We have a full cohort chosen. Because of the legal aspects, we're being very careful in structuring the fund, and we're going to some very senior and experienced advisors. We're talking to people from around the world on what the best way to approach this would be. We'll be accepting a mix of fiat money and Bitcoin from investors originally in the fund.
That's the plan. But it's really interesting. You have to sometimes get the chicken and the egg syndrome where you have, well, this is how we want to do the plan, but do the investors want the plan set up like that? So sometimes you want to reach out to the investors, but you don't know who's actually committed, and you want to tailor your plan over to the way the investors are, depending if you're going after institutional investors or going after high net worth individuals.
That's right.
So both of us not even being involved in the finance sector or not even managing or having a fund before, because Arthur, his accelerator program was not a fund based. It was just direct investing.
That's right. Our intention was to make it fund based, but with the Canadian landscape, we were given government money that we couldn't. It was just a fantastic. So we took it and we built a portfolio of 18 companies. But what we're doing here is really it's the model that came out of the States. It's that venture capital, private entrepreneurial model.
And are your investors mostly Canadian or from overseas?
We're probably now looking at just doing it in Canada, but it's still on the table. There's a lot of decisions being made, a lot to deal with what the investors want, with regulations in different areas, with cost. Once you start doing a global fund, or you start saying we want European investors, American investors, setting up limited partnerships in those countries and compliance, it gets really expensive. So. We're still investigating it, but what I think we have decided is that we'll be working with a finance team to plug some holes that Arthur and I don't have in that sector that are going to help us to investigate the funding, get the term sheets developed. So it looks like we'll be forming a partnership with some other individuals, which are going to help us at that end.
You can imagine the complexity working in this space where. There's an association whether or not we take any companies in that do actually have what would be defined as cryptocurrencies. We are working in a decentralized app space, so we want to make sure that our investors are protected no matter what happens to the regulatory environment around the fund.
Yeah. And you mentioned you're taking fiat and Bitcoin. Is one of the reasons that some investors are only allowed to put in fiat? Have you encountered that challenge?
I think ideally we'd like to have both accepted, but it really is going to come down to the investors and the individuals that we decide to work with. We could come down to foreign institutional investors that might not have Bitcoin. They might only have fiat. They may not want to deal with fiat. So we're not exactly sure, but I think we would like to be in the space where we are accepting Bitcoin as well, but who knows how it will turn out.
And perhaps what about the startup side? So we've talked a bit on the investor side. Are the startups going to be primarily from Canada, or are you also trying to attract American, maybe European startups even to relocate here?
Yeah, so we would like to be global, and we've done, I'm not sure how many interviews we've done yet, but we've had about 40 or so applications, and we've interviewed 15.
Yeah, and they're surprisingly spaced out.
We've had guys exchanges setting up in Mexico. We've had guys from all over the world, people that have applied. And what we do is we form a panel, and we have as many people as possible we can on this panel, giving advice to the teams and seeing if they're at the proper stage to come into the program. And we definitely have some teams selected that we would like to take part. It's a matter of now structuring the fund, getting the investors, and we are hopeful within a month and a half that we can have the first cohort teams working as the space is ready for them to be here.
Our goal is to really just be launching decentralized app startups out of this space, like from 9 to possibly more at a time.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the effect that's going to have on the city and the world if there are that many of these type of disruptive companies being created.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how it's in Canada, but is it easy to get companies, maybe to get visas for people who want to relocate here? And
we've looked into it. We've seen that most of the accelerator programs or incubators, they kind of focus on the country that they're in. But we've done some research. We have in-house legal counsel, and we've done some research, and we've seen that it's not. We don't think it's going to be an issue to get the visas for 3-month programs. I think one of the main things is they need to have a company already established in their country.
Yeah.
And there are some things to do, but we've looked at it and we think that we're confident that we can open it up to global market. And then, we also have plans to franchise the model that we're doing in the future as well. And we have a mentorship base right now already of over 100 people, which we want to continuously increase. So right now we have a lot of the top thought leaders in the Bitcoin space as well. A lot of people that aren't in the Bitcoin space that offer, different aspects of their professions that they can contribute to the teams that are coming in. And I've got 1,000 mentors in my mind that I'd like to have to support 5 or more franchised locations around the world.
Yeah, no, I think that would be very exciting. I think, like for example, I've been looking. I also been talking to you about this, looking if there's something possible I can do in Europe, and I know this. So far, I guess all the funds are in the US. I guess you guys will be the first one.
Well, there's actually one in Australia that's just
There's one in Australia?
Yeah, there's actually a large one that started up in Australia. And there's been tons of interest. I probably had 10 to 15 different countries, and even multiples from different countries that have approached me to say, hey, once you get this off the ground, I'd love to do a similar setup, because I believe the space for Decentral here, it was a carefully planned model of meetups, getting people together, getting them excited, getting them in the co-working space, getting teams formed, reaching out to entrepreneur communities, reaching out to developer communities, getting them excited about the space, hopefully get them all together to start forming companies, putting them up in the accelerator program, pushing them out, hopefully to put them in front of investors, give them the mentorship that they need. So it's a whole, process with Decentral here, and I hope that people can say, hey, here's a turnkey package that I can use in my city.
Are you guys agnostic regarding the protocol? Because people are building on all kinds of different, with the counterparty or Ethereum or Next. I know you were involved in Ethereum as well.
Yeah, both Ethan and I are.
You as well.
Ethereum.
Okay.
Yeah, we're agnostic here in Decentral. Yeah, we don't. I don't want to tie ourselves down to any one particular platform. I think there's different platforms that do certain needs. Like, for example, we had Tatiana discussing yesterday why she selected Counterparty instead of using Mastercoin for her coin she put out. So there's going to be ones that work. Some that offer certain features that other ones don't. So I think it's important to be agnostic in the space and go with whatever works at the time.
And are you interested mainly in developing on the applications that are being developed on top of those, or also perhaps in the development of such protocols themselves?
I think both, but I think our focus will be on the applications on top of the platforms.
What's great about this space, Decentral, is that really any startups or any companies can work at this space, and you have instant access to people who are doing exciting things in this space, whether it's employees of Ethereum who are working out of here, or employees of really anything. I mean, my company, Bitcoinsultants, when we got started out of this space, it was great to have a desk available. It was great to have these resources available, and it really helped launch my company. And the fact that, as Anthony mentioned, it's completely agnostic, regardless of what decentralized technology you're working on or working with, as long as you have a place to get that work done and to tap into the minds who are making great waves in this industry. It's excellent to have.
And when you're passionate about this, you're attracting other people, depending on whatever field they're working in. And then they all seem to come in and get excited about, decentralized space.
And the Bitcoin ATM brings in a lot of interesting people too.
Yeah, that's been successful.
It's been good. We had the first Bitcoin ATM in Toronto, the first one made by the Ottawa company, BitAccess.
Yeah.
So
Made in Canada.
That's right. And it's been good, and that draws people in as well. And then they're learning about Bitcoin. We one of our great tools is Why Bitcoin Magazine as well, which is an amazing place for people to learn about Bitcoin. So we're handing those out a lot, getting people their first wallets, giving them the magazine to learn a lot about Bitcoin.
Can you talk at all about the companies that are going to be part of the first cohort, or is that?
We can't say specifics as of yet because we haven't officially invested in them. But I can say that they're
we've got our eyes on a few of them.
Yeah, some are working. They're targeting the Ethereum platform. Others are we have some. Yeah, what else can we say about them?
But it's about us getting the fund structured and being able to offer them something, and and hopefully they're around still by the time we're ready to do that. So we definitely have our eyes on some, but I mean, the best ones are going to be.
The thing that surprised me most is that they're really creating things that are real world related. They're actually like one of them has a hardware component that will be, it's going to be out there, and it's a real world. This is not just an online business. And it's related to the blockchain, which is very cool.
Yeah, that is cool. Yeah. And can you talk about the font size? Or like how are you?
Yeah, well, we've got two options. Either we're going to go big, and that's going to be. So our initial plan was to have a fund and have an accelerator program that does two things. It actually invests in companies and invests in the currencies and the token systems associated with the decentralized application companies coming through our program. So we thought that was a great hybrid model and something that's never been seen before. So you have a traditional investment like Techstars or where they'll take a percentage of the company and invest in the companies. But then we're also seeing the model like the BitAngels Fund, which is David Johnson and Turpin and Brock Pierce as part of where they're investing in the token systems. They're not really actually focused on the companies; they're investing in the token systems. So we thought it would be excellent to kind of put the two things together. But now we are realizing that there are other issues to deal with when you have investors investing in currencies as well as the companies, and it adds another layer of complexity. So if the ideal situation for us would be a fund somewhere around the $50 million mark where we could also invest in token systems and in the companies and then franchise and use a global fund to fund the franchises and use the mentor network to mentor the franchises. However, if we decide to just focus on Toronto and get it off the ground, we're probably looking at maybe a $5 million fund and just focusing on the cohorts and the teams that are here.
Can you talk a bit about those complexities if you invest in both the company and the currency?
Yeah, well, some investors won't necessarily want to invest in the token system, but they'll invest in the companies involved with decentralized applications. So it might be a matter of us splitting the fund in two and having a separate fund.
Because some investors have preferences.
Yeah, and then it comes down to tax. It comes down to their tax situations. It's not as easy as we thought. And you might have four different investors that have different needs and want you to structure the fund in certain ways to so it's better on their taxes. It's quite complex. So the easiest path for us might be for right now to come up with a traditional model, one that's proven, get it structured, and go with that, and then maybe introduce a second fund for the token system. Because I believe we are in a position here that we have the knowledge of the space. We have the knowledge of what seems to be coming out in the next generation decentralized application space, where we could probably make pretty good decisions on the currencies and on the token systems that people want to get into it, but they don't know where to put it, and we could offer the guidance.
And as Bitcoin was, these tokens will be very high return investment. It's different than startup equity, which is startup equity is normally a safe investment now with accelerators. You'll see good accelerators creating a return of about 10 times in 5 years.
Yeah, the token systems offer another way to offer value to the investors.
It's an expert. It's a fund that needs expert management.
Yeah.
So I guess if you are focused on investing in the companies, though, then does that limit, for example? Can they still do open source software, or will then the risk be too big that somebody just
That's a good question.
close it? And
that's a very good question, and something I'm struggling with one of my companies, CryptoKit, is there's people coming out and working on in collaborations on open source software projects, which is great and it's going to help the community. But there also has to be ways to monetize certain technology too. So I think it's we're probably bringing in companies that do offer either a team that is a phenomenal team and has some type of competitive edge or some type of technology, proprietary technology. But I mean, how do we invest in open source companies? It's a tricky thing. It's really difficult.
In part, we're supporting it at the earliest stages with the co-working space and the environment, and then also opening up opening up our mentor community slightly to select companies that we want to help out before they even come into the accelerator, and just making connections with investors as mentors. So, because there's the stage before everything else, where the protocols you mentioned, and investing in protocols, who supports the growth of the protocols before even apps are built on top of platforms, right? So it's a whole, all these stages somehow need to have support, and right now the very earliest grassroots stages are pretty much volunteer. Right?
Yeah, and we are supporting it by what we're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, just a community event that we're all involved in, supporting the space. But I mean, we're in this to make money too. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I was talking to Mike Hearn earlier, and I guess he's thinking of some of these same issues, like how do you monetize open source, and I guess that with his crowdfunding platform, that is exactly, or he's trying to tackle that challenge. I don't know if this is necessarily a model that is profitable. It's more like a model that maybe gets funded the things that a lot of people want to get done, but there's just no way to monetize them. But I think what's really fascinating with something like, let's say, Ethereum, is how you can make open source software and open source protocols and maybe still monetize them if you have, its own currency.
Right.
So I guess we'll see how that works out.
That's an opportunity that we're trying to figure out how to capitalize on best, that other accelerators don't, and funds really don't have yet as of yet.
And it really has this kind of this opportunity that you take, maybe whether it's like a public good or something like that, and you turn it into something you can actually invest in. And then I think that is amazing.
What's unique about it is that traditionally, when people would invest in open source, they would offer services that go alongside open source. Red Hat follows that model, and there's examples. The Mozilla Foundation follows that model as well, where they open source the product, but they charge for the services and helping people integrate it in their systems.
Right.
With Ethereum, there's the open source platform, but there's also the token system which fuels the platform. So it doesn't fit into the same, traditional open source model that came before it. It is still open source, but it's a completely different spin, and it'll be interesting to watch to see how it develops over time.
I mean, it's much more direct, And I guess if you look at even Red Hat and Linux, even if Red Hat's like a very successful company, if you look at how popular Linux is, then Red Hat is not that big, if you compare it to like Google or Apple or Microsoft. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot more potential with something like that Ethereum.
Absolutely.
We can still monetize on the decentralized applications as well. You don't have to make those open source per se.
Yeah, but then it's who's monetizing on that. I mean, it's a struggle that we've had with Ethereum. Is the for-profit, non-profit entity, and we've gone back and forth with different approaches, and do we want to be the ones that are deciding and charging for the application? Do we want to be the ones developing, or are we going to focus on the platform? And it looks like we're just going to focus on the platform.
Yeah.
It looks like we are not going to have an arm that's going to be actually doing any for-profit work. But that's still being worked out right now. But it is a debate within our team. But it looks like our focus will be on getting this product out and getting this open source platform out, and let other people be developing the products that are built on top of it.
And then the Ethereum model will be the currency, Ether, and the expectation that will gain in value as people build applications.
The value proposition, we're putting out the fuel that runs it. You need Ether in order to run the system. I'm not sure where the value proposition on Ether will actually go. That's not something that we are focusing on. It's about, this is what's needed to run the platform. We're selling a product of Ether. We're selling it for Bitcoin, which is what our plan is. So we're trying to distinguish this between a token system and make it clear that this actually is a product. It's not a currency. It's not an investment vehicle.
Ether is a product. It's not a currency.
Yeah, we consider it fuel. We consider it something that runs our network. Okay, it's not something that you're going to be using to buy and sell goods with.
Yeah, I understand that.
It's like gas.
Yeah.
Right? And you need gas in order to run your car. You need fuel, you need ether in order to run the platform, in order for decentralized applications. Any computations will need ether in order to run. So that's where I see the value of ether is. It is required, just like Bitcoin, it's required to run the platform.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, that makes total sense.
And one allegory, I guess, is that with Bitcoin, the value of Bitcoin, or I guess the perceived value of Bitcoin goes up the more you're able to use that token for goods and services. Whereas with Ether, the more decentralized applications that are written and that exist for people to run on their own, now the more valuable that fuel is because you can do so much more with it.
Exactly. The more demand there will be for the fuel as well, right? Well, perhaps we can talk about the Bitcoin Alliance of Canada as well a bit. I know it's a bit like a foundation as far as I understand it, but what's interesting, what I've heard of it, but perhaps you guys can go into detail, is that you're trying to do this very decentralized and sort of quote-unquote democratic. I don't know if that's the right term.
That's right. The Bitcoin Alliance of Canada is a non-profit organization dedicated to promoting and educating the Canadian public about Bitcoin in Canada. It was formed with a very, I guess, interesting take on choosing the first set of directors. Anthony, maybe you want to talk about that. Unlike what other people or what other organizations are doing, where they just sort of appointed themselves when they were born, the Alliance took a different approach.
So I very closely studied when the foundation was formed, and what I realized by listening to the community was that there were a lot of international people that were not really happy with the way the foundation was formed. It was basically a group that decided who they were and announced themselves. They announced their sponsorship, they announced the people, and it really didn't have the involvement of the rest of the Bitcoin community, yet they were intending to represent the international Bitcoin community. And a lot of people really saw them as a group of Americans deciding what's best for Bitcoin. When you don't have the support of a large majority of the community, you're in trouble from the beginning. And that's what I saw with the foundation. And when I looked at starting something in Canada, I learned from what the foundation did, and my whole thing was to get the mass support of the community. You want to get 90%. That's the number that I use. You want to get 90% of people believing in what you're doing. And in order to do that, we made press releases and put them out nationally to let people know, hey, this is the idea that we're coming up with, a Canadian organization that can represent Bitcoin in the media, that can represent Bitcoin and get merchants accepting it, can represent Bitcoin and regulators and banks, and just get people informed about Bitcoin. So we put multiple press releases out to let the community know that this is our intention, and that anybody that wanted to participate was able to participate in the formation of the initial board of directors. And we had two groups. We had a voting group, and we had the actual people applying to be on the board.
The candidates.
The candidates, and you couldn't be both. It was one or the other. So we ended up with
But you couldn't be both.
No, if you were voting on who was going to be a board of director, you could not be applying for the board position as well.
So that was to prevent that you vote for yourself?
Exactly. And I myself applied for a position just like everybody else did on the director, and we ended up with 15 people that formed the voting committee, and we ended up with about 12 or so people that wanted to be on the board. The election team selected the eight board members.
Initially, there was 8, yes.
Initially, the 8 board members. The voting committee then disbanded, and the board members took over. So this basically was an inclusive way of doing things where there were multiple national press releases put out that gave people months to say, hey, this is what's happening. If you want participation, contact us. Let us know you're interested in one of the procedures, like either being on the board or being involved. I spoke with hundreds of people from these press releases. And then we selected a team that was representative of the community, where afterwards no one can come back and say, hey, I didn't know about this, or, how did you select yourself? Well, this is the process that we use. It's open, it was transparent, we believe it was fair, and now this group of 8 was selected to continue forward and represent the community. We've got legal counsel, we have accountants, a couple accountants that work for us. We just put on the Bitcoin Expo in Toronto earlier this year. It's a volunteer effort. Nobody makes money on this. None of the directors make any money. The expo is a complete nonprofit event. 100% proceeds were put back to the community. Nobody was paid. It was a complete volunteer effort. So we're doing this because we believe this is a community side of what we do, what Michael and I do, and the other board and the other members of the Alliance do. And I think we're respected for the way that we've done things, and I just wish we had more time to do more efforts in the national Bitcoin space.
No, I think that sounds great. I know there's been, Germany has also been the foundation started, etc. And I think mostly people have gone the other way also because it's easier, right? And
well, there's a few reasons why. You do it because it's easier, and also because there's just not the community out there yet, and it needs a couple of people to spearhead the program. One way might be better than the other, but it's good that people can see there are different models, and they can choose which best works for them when they're setting something up.
And I remember the first time that I heard about the Alliance. It was one of the meetups here in Toronto before Decentral existed. Anthony, you approached me and told me about it, and I remember the first thing that I thought was, of course someone's making another group to combat the foundation. How many groups are there going to be all jockeying to do the same thing? But in that bar over that one beer when we were talking about it, the vision was completely different, and it really resonated with me. On the one hand, the foundation, they've put themselves in charge of the code, of the protocol, and of the Bitcoin technology that everyone uses worldwide. But the Bitcoin Alliance of Canada, the vision that Anthony shared with me when he first told me about it was, it's an educating group. It's a networking group that helps any Canadian learn about Bitcoin and find different people who are doing different things in the Bitcoin space. Are you a merchant looking to accept Bitcoin? Hey, talk to that member of the Alliance. Are you a developer? You want more resources to learn how to do it? Well, talk to this guy. And this sort of alliance of Bitcoin contacts across Canada, it strengthens Bitcoin in Canada, and it acts as an outreach. And that's a much different goal than what the foundation had. So very quickly, my initial hesitation of starting yet another group was quickly washed away once I understood it was two completely separate goals.
Are you guys also focused on lobby work and regulation here?
Yes and no. We don't actively go out to lobby. However, we have been engaged in conversations with members of provincial parliament, with the Ontario Securities Commission, and now the British Columbia Securities Commission. Because we are a networking group of Bitcoin professionals across Canada, we are a natural magnet for people who are looking for more information. So there have been members of Parliament reaching out to us. There have been regulatory bodies reaching out to us just to learn more about it. And
it's a lot. I think we'll have some disagreement within our board, but I'd like to see it as not as a lobby group, as an information providing group. When people are looking for information where they're provided, if they're not ready for it, that's fine. I'm not here personally to push anything on anybody, just provide the information. And I think the merits of Bitcoin and this technology sell itself.
And I think that's absolutely required, especially with a technology so new as Bitcoin, where the media says, it's being used to buy drugs, and hackers are using it and stealing money, whereas the actual technology itself has nothing to do with drugs or theft. It's an easy way of sending payments over the internet. So to have this information resource available to regulators to learn what Bitcoin truly is, and to separate the media hype from the reality, I think is absolutely essential.
But it's interesting that you guys have taken kind of also the way you phrased it and that, a network, and you focus on the community and the connection, because I think that's different in other places, and it's interesting. I guess that also kind of represents.
It represents the name Alliance, which is interesting too.
Alliance,
that's very key in the name as well. That's why the Alliance was chosen, and that's why the Global Bitcoin Alliance is, which is an organization now that's, it's a group of national organizations that have gathered together to share resources and best practices to help grow Bitcoin communities worldwide. And that's, the name is really important as well. And it's just a friendship that doesn't need contracts. It doesn't need, just let's help everybody grow their Bitcoin communities and provide them with the tools that they need and information resources, and just instead of, be open and transparent. We do monthly meetings now with the Global Bitcoin Alliance, and I've met some great people that represent the Israeli Bitcoin Foundation, representatives in Australia, representatives in Netherlands, that have built up these communities and don't need to have chapters really. It's just groups that let the national and local levels take care of the tasks, but we just kind of are there to share what has worked for us so that we can help grow the communities.
Yeah, I think, I don't know to what extent that's also a reflection of you guys' views on regulation, because I know some people feel like this is something that should be actively approached. One should try to help make Bitcoin-friendly laws, whereas others think like it's much more important that we just build Bitcoin into companies and infrastructure, and I guess after it's hopefully, it will be at such a point that when the regulation comes, it has to be Bitcoin friendly because it's so far progressed.
Every group has its own, view on regulation and rules, and that's why with the Global Bitcoin Alliance, at least, we just want to share resources. That's it. We're not taking a position as a whole entity of this is what we want to do with regular. No, we're just here to let the local national groups do as they please. We support it and we share what's worked for us, but really we don't take positions on actually any hard position on anything.
The Bitcoin Alliance of Canada is much the same. I've received emails from our members across Canada who are, when they heard that we were talking to the OSC, they were very mad. And they say, Bitcoin should not be regulated, shouldn't be touched. The Alliance shouldn't be doing this. And I've received other emails.
That's the Ontario Securities Exchange, or Commission, yeah.
Yes, I've received other emails where people were very happy that we were spearheading this effort. And really, we didn't do anything other than simply exist. They reached out to us for information. So I think it's great that that the Alliance is engaged in these discussions, but the Alliance itself doesn't have a for or an against position when it comes to regulation. We're just a resource for anybody who needs to learn more about Bitcoin.
Perhaps, Ethan, let me ask you. You came as a philosopher into Bitcoin. How did that happen?
Well, there are a lot of philosophical issues, right? With decentralized technologies, we've had ideas about how to reorganize governments and economies, but it hasn't been feasible until Bitcoin. There have been a lot of previous attempts, though. And I think the idea of being able to build more modern stuff with decentralized autonomous organizations, but ultimately, how do you make a viable economy that doesn't rely upon central authority, like to control it, to print money, and to take you into war using your money for such purposes? It ultimately gives control back to individuals, allows them to have bank accounts without getting approval from a central authority. The list goes on.